I'm CK. Tonight we've got another kit from Velleman. It's their SMD X-mass tree. I'm recording this in April of 2023, so it's not quite seasonal, but I wanted to see what Velleman's beginner SMD kit looked like, see if it's going to teach people something about SMD and see if it's laid out well for a beginner. So we'll dive into it, put it together, and see how it goes. Hope you enjoy the video. Box is a typical Velleman box with a oversleeve describing the product over a generic brown box. SMD Seasonal Soldering Gadget. SMD soldering. They call it a level 3, which is interesting for a surface mount beginner type kit. 6 LEDs flash, pins supplied to wear as a badge. Extra parts are supplied in case some get lost or damaged, which is very good for beginning surface mount because they get very slippery. And it needs a 3-volt lithium button cell, not included. That would be a 2032, and I've got plenty of those. And then there's QR code for the build guide, and it looks like some resistors, probably some capacitors here, the LEDs, and that is what the outside looks like. Let's look at what the inside looks like. Oh, I put my X-Acto knife blade away and it's still got tape here or something. Let's get everything out of the box. Little envelope, paper, and nothing else. We'll get the box ready to recycle. See what the paper says first. Should be the typical Velleman instructions. And then it describes how to do surface mount in a very clear way. There's the solder pads. Put a pool of solder down, position the component, heat that, then do the other end. Pretty straightforward and pretty correct. So we'll start by doing the resistors, then there's a couple of transistors, then there's LEDs, even though these are showing 3-pin LEDs. I don't know why they're 3-pin, they're single color, they're just red, Then a couple of electrolytic capacitors, then the battery. So it's a pretty straightforward and probably quick kit. And as you can see, here's the schematic. There's voltage in with a little smoothing capacitor. Current limiting resistors for the LEDs. And then another capacitor here. I'm not sure what that's for. Resistor to ground for this other side. So these 3 will blink and these 3 will blink. And there's 2 transistors. So these capacitors are going to help with making it flash. So let's see what we've got in the bag itself. Not much. We've got the circuit board, which is a typical Velleman circuit board, copper-plated pads. The pads for the capacitors, resistors, and LEDs. And again, I'm not familiar with 3-pin LEDs. I really don't. I have not encountered that for single color LEDs. 2 transistors. These transistors would be a bit of a challenge, and these LEDs actually would be more of a challenge than the standard 2-pin LEDs. And here are those LEDs in this plastic holder. Here are our capacitors. Here are our resistors, and they are 471s, so 4.7K, right? No, 470, period. I'm sorry, I misread that. 471, 47, and 10, so that's 470 ohm, very low value. And here's transistors in their little package, and the battery connector. Let's see how this goes on. Oh, so that's going to go on top of... No, it'll go on the back. Never mind. Make sure that... Yeah, goes on the back. And I don't see a pin to put it on my jacket. Oh well. So that's it. Let's get the soldering iron heated up and we'll play with these LEDs. I'm going to play a little bit with them before we install them. So let me get the soldering iron heated up and we'll get going. I've zoomed the cameras in a little bit because we're going to be doing surface mount. And I'm actually going to do something else here right now. We're going to be moving to using our 0.025 inch solder, because that's what I typically use on hand soldering surface mount components. And we'll start with the resistors. So let's see. I'm going to put a little dab of solder on all of the resistor pads. One, not all, sorry. One each for each resistor. And I don't do both pads at once because I have found that if you try and do both pads at once, the component will rock while you're working with it, and that's not good. So I do one, then solder the other side. Let's dig the resistors out of their packaging into this. You'll notice I don't use the lower sided parts bin for these. I use the high sided one so the resistors don't accidentally jump out. They will do that. Surface mount components will jump out all over the place. I'm going to grab my surface mount positioning tweezers. Again, oh, these are big. These are big components. So that's the first plus, is these resistors are very large as surface mount components go. So we'll heat up that one solder bit we already put on there. Slide the resistor into it. And there it is. Not going anywhere. So we'll do that with all the... Oh, and then what we would do next is just go ahead and solder this other end. And that's how you do a surface mount resistor by hand. Pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to do the rest of the resistors in fast playback because there's nothing much more to say about them. So enjoy resistor time. And that's the resistors. One thing you'll notice, I did put them all with the value side pointing up. It doesn't really matter. The resistors certainly don't care which way they go, so I just like to do it mainly because I'm on camera. If I were not on camera, I would just put them any which way they ended up lying down in the bin. Next will be the transistors. We'll get them out of their packaging. And as I often say, always remember, this packaging is not designed for you and I to get it open. It's designed for a machine to get it open. So don't complain about the packaging. The machines are their intended audience, and the machines are quite happy with it. Now these transistors, these are very small pads. It's kind of interesting to put this in the transistors like this in a beginner type kit. I'm going to do the gate side as my anchor pad. Pick up a transistor. You have to be a little careful that we're actually over the other pads. I may have raised that up more than I want. No, that's okay. Oh, they gave us 3 transistors. They didn't give us any extra resistors, even though they mentioned they had some extra. I'm banging the parts tray on my workbench to flip the components over and to flip the components onto the workbench. That was dumb. So no extra resistors, but 1 extra transistor. Which we'll put in the spare parts bin. That one's all crooked. Don't want that. That's better. Now we'll do the other 2 pins of each transistor. Yeah, most surface mount components are pretty straightforward to do. You just have to be a little cautious. It's when you get into the integrated circuits, which have very, very tiny, closely spaced pins, that you may have a challenge. And I've got a couple of kits like that on the channel that you can look at. Now we're going to do all the LEDs in this wrapping. I'm going to put them in here. Still got 1 transistor in there, which I will tuck away for later use. Now, I believe that the board requires what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got 2, 4, 6. Oh, we got 8 LEDs. Now again, as I said, I'm not familiar with these three-pin LEDs. Oops. The ones I typically use just have a 2 leads, cathode and anode. So I'm going to try and power this a little bit, see if I can get it to light up somehow. I can't tell which side is the cathode and which side is the anode. I'm not getting them to light up. Let me look at the schematic only shows 2 connections. So I don't know. Maybe the 1 pin is only for registration purposes. But we'll do the same thing we did for the transistors. Now we'll do the two capacitors. These are big chunky capacitors. And there are 3 of them. And we only need 2 of them. Oh, the LEDs are all in parallel, not series, so don't have to worry about one being bad taking the whole thing down. Now I forget, there's a bevel on one end, and I forget whether that's the positive side or the negative side, because usually when I'm using surface mount electrolytics, I usually use the can style. So the positive side is where the bevel is. I suspected that, but just wanted to make sure, of course. And if you notice on this board, the 2 positives face each other inside, so you don't want to mess that up. Now we'll put the battery box on. Oh, here's some more for... Oh, I'm sorry, I messed up. R8 and R7 are 47K. Okay. I gotta pull those back off. That's these 2, not 470. So before we put the battery box on, I'm gonna deal with that. It does give me a chance to say that, in my opinion and experience, surface mount resistors and capacitors, and in general the 2-pin LEDs, I can do those faster than I can do standard through-hole resistors, because there's no lead bending, there's no lead trimming, there's no putting them through the holes. I probably save about, and I'm gonna wild guess this, I can probably do a surface mount resistor about 30 to 35% faster than I can do a through-hole resistor, and in some cases even faster than that, particularly if you've got a lot. Say this thing here, which is which is my LED carousel. There's like 110 surface mount LEDs on there, but they just went in very quickly, just bap, 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 bap. I've got a video of that on the channel, of course. I'll link it in the description. No, I won't. Whenever I say I'm going to link something in the description, I almost always forget. So just search the channel for Ferris wheel and you can see it. All right. That is all the surface mount components on. Get the solder pad out of the way. I'm going to take this light off for the moment. I've got a 2032. Let me make sure this has got some charge in it. Oh yeah, it's still at 3 volts. It might drop very rapidly, but it's still at 3 volts to start. So we will insert it, and there we go. see if we get a little more of the glittery. It's all glittery. So that's it. Very quick, simple surface mount, except for, and I'm going to turn the light back on. These LEDs, the 3-pin LEDs, are very, very, the pins are very, very small. And those are going to be the most challenging part of the kit. And a youngster might get really frustrated by them. So if you have a chance to supervise and coach, get them comfortable on the resistors, then do the transistors, of course. Do the transistors, in my opinion, before the LEDs, and that's the way it is in the build guide too. And just take your time. Or start with a kit like this one, where as you can see, these LEDs just have standard 2 pins, and they're much easier to solder down. But this is pretty good. You know, I'm not sure a 10 or 11-year-old boy or girl would be able to do this without either getting frustrated or something. But again, coach them along. It's a good kit. As you can see, went together very quickly and works just fine, does what it says it does. And another good kit from Velleman. Hope you enjoyed the video.